The desert was breathing fire that afternoon, the kind of heat that warped the horizon and made every shadow dance like smoke, and Private First Class Alena Ward felt it pressing against her skin under the layered weight of her gear. She had been in this place for 3 months, but the air still smelled like someone had set the whole world on fire. Sand crawled into everything, into her scope, her boots, her teeth, the grit of war that no amount of training ever prepared you for. Her rifle, an M2010 ESR, sat across her knees, black matte metal hot to the touch, its scope catching the light like a quiet predator watching its prey. They had joked when they handed it to her, said it was just for fun, said let the rookie try out the long shot, range was open. They laughed, and she smiled because soldiers laugh to survive. The forward operating base sat on the edge of nowhere, a collection of sandbags, tents, and steel, the kind of place that looked temporary even though it had been here for years. The locals called it the place of silence because nothing grew here, not even sound. Alena checked her spotter's notes, the wind direction, the humidity, the barometer pressure. Her mind worked in numbers now, not feelings. She had learned early that math was more reliable than mercy. Across the valley lay the old refinery, a scarred skeleton of metal and rust. Insurgent positions had been spotted there 2 days ago, and command wanted eyes on it. Alena volunteered, partly because she was good at sitting still and partly because she liked the quiet. The world made sense through the crosshairs of a scope. It was the only place where chaos could be measured. The wind was whispering east to west, 7 knots steady. She noted it in her head muscle memory, aligning with instinct. Her spotter, Sergeant Louis Ortega, sat beside her, chewing on a piece of gum and scanning with binoculars. He had that calm, steady voice that never seemed to break even when rounds were flying over their heads. You sure about this, rookie? He muttered, his tone halfway between teasing and concern. She smirked and adjusted her bipod, sure as gravity, Sarge. They had been up there since dawn, watching the refinery like hawks. Nothing moved except the heat waves that shimmered off the sand, and every hour that passed stretched longer than the last. But Alena didn't mind. She liked the stillness. It gave her something the world rarely offered, control, the kind that only comes when your finger is on a trigger and your heartbeat is the metronome of fate. She remembered her first day in sniper school, how they had made her shoot with her eyes closed to feel the weapon breathe like a living thing, how she learned that the rifle was not just metal and powder but an extension of her focus, of her will. She had hit targets out to 1,500 meters back then, but 2,950, that was different. That was the kind of shot that could turn a name into legend or dust. As the sun began to sink behind the jagged hills, the radio cracked, a live command voice, sharp and cold. Target confirmed, insurgent leader at refinery, coordinates marked, mission priority high. Alena's breath slowed. She reached for the bolt and chambered the round. The desert held its breath too. The shot distance came through the comms like a whisper carried on static. 2,950 meters. Alena repeated it under her breath as if the numbers themselves could ground her into the dust. Her mind began calculating elevation, holdover, wind drift, and Coriolis effect. The Earth's spin was not just science here, it was survival. She adjusted the scope dial, tiny movements that could mean the difference between a legend and a miss. Sergeant Ortega muttered coordinates through clenched teeth, his eyes glued to the spotting scope. Target moving on the catwalk near the refinery, North Tower, second level, wearing black tactical vest, surrounded by 3 armed guards. Alena steadied her breathing, inhaled through her nose, exhaled slow through parted lips. The rifle rested perfectly balanced on the bipod, its barrel pointing toward destiny. The distance was absurd, near the limit of what her weapon could do, but she liked impossible. It meant there was no room for doubt, only execution. The light was dropping fast, golden dust mixing with smoke rising from the ruins, the whole valley bathed in a dying sun. She dialed the scope to compensate for mirage distortion, the shimmering and made targets dance, illusions built by heat. She had learned to see through them, to separate ghosts from flesh. Her hands remembered every lesson from Fort Benning, the days spent crawling through the lectures about bullet trajectory, how temperature and altitude shift 0 point, how at long range even your heartbeat can throw a round off course. She slowed hers by thinking of cold rain back home, the quiet streets of Vermont where she had grown up, learning patience from fishing trips with her dad. Command voice cut back in Sniper 1, green light confirmed, take the shot. When ready, Alena's world narrowed to the crosshairs, the sound of wind scraping over dunes, the faint creak of her glove tightening around the trigger. Ortega murmured, wind steady 7 knots east to west, 0.3 mils left, hold high 0.9. She felt the desert's pulse, the tension before thunder, the unseen hum that vibrates through bone right before history happens. She squeezed the trigger slow, steady. The recoil nudged her shoulder, a soft kick for something so violent the supersonic crack disappeared into distance, leaving only silence. Ortega tracked through the scope vapor trail, slicing the air, then dropping like fate. He saw the impact before she did, target down, clean hit. Alena exhaled, her breath trembling in the space between disbelief and her almost 3,000 meters, the kind of shot snipers talk about in hushed tones around campfires years later, the kind that would be written into unofficial records, the kind that no one would believe if she hadn't just seen it herself. Ortega whistled low. You just rewrote the book, rookie. But command didn't celebrate. They called for immediate exfil, team moving and hot possible counterattack. Insurgent chatter spiking on radio frequencies. Alena broke down the rifle, quick practiced hands slipping each part into her case. The desert no longer silent, now it screamed, distant gunfire echoing across the valley. They started down the ridge, sand sliding beneath their boots. Alena could feel her pulse still racing from the shot. It wasn't pride, it was something heavier, a quiet realization that every perfect bullet carried a price. They reached the Humvee waiting behind the ridge, dust swirling around its wheels. Ortega climbed in first, tapping her shoulder with a grin. Hell of a shot, kid. Now let's make sure we live long enough to tell it. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes because deep inside the silence after the kill had followed her back, and it would not let. The night came fast and violent, the kind that swallowed sound and spat it back in gunfire. Their Humvee roared over cracked sand, the wheels throwing dust like smoke signals. Alena sat in the back, her rifle clutched tight, her gloves still smelling of gun oil and metal. Ortega was on comms, trying to cut through the static command voices layered over each other. Too many channels, too much chaos. The refinery kill had stirred a hornet nest. Insurgent trucks were on the move, convoys of armed men heading toward their last known position. The hit had crippled their command chain, but also lit the desert on fire. Every fighter within miles wanted blood. Ortega kept his eyes on the horizon, black shapes dancing between dunes, headlights flickering like predators in the dark. Alena felt her stomach tighten, not from fear but from focus, the kind that turns your thoughts sharp. She ran through escape options in her head. Terrain, flat visibility, poor limited cover. She hated the open desert, nothing to hide behind, nothing but faith and skill and the thin armor of the vehicle. Her rifle case rested beside her knees, each screw and bolt memorized like prayer beads. The radio snapped, command to Sniper 1, convoy en route to fallback point Delta, hold perimeter, support units inbound. 2 mics. Copy that, Ortega replied, his voice steady, his eyes not. He had been through worse, Iraq, Mosul, Fallujah, places where death was a language people learned young. He looked over at her. You good, rookie? She nodded, eyes fixed on the rifle barrel, reflection of moonlight running down its length like a silver scar. She was more than good, she was alive, and that feeling burned electric. They hit the ridge where the terrain dipped into a wadi, dry riverbed flanked by stone cliffs. Ortega braked hard, lights off, motion sensors on. They rolled into the shadows, the engine humming low. Alena climbed out the desert, air colder now, the stars burning sharp and distant. She set up the rifle again, the bipod digging into sand, scanning through the thermal scope. Nothing but heat, ghosts of distant rocks, until movement flared to life. South ridge for vehicles approaching fast. She adjusted the magnification and watched them come, engines growling, lights bouncing like angry eyes. Her heartbeat slowed again, her world shrinking back into crosshairs. Ortega fed her range data, 900 meters and closing, elevation drop negligible, crosswind mild. She waited, breath steady, eyes tracing the lead truck, its windshield glowing in thermal, the driver unaware that death already had him measured. Her finger rested against the trigger. The first shot cracked sharp and pure. The driver slumped, the vehicle swerved into the sand, chaos unfolded like a storm. The second shot dropped, a gunner climbing onto the roof. Third hit the tire of the third truck, sparks and flame, the whole convoy skidding into confusion. Return fire lit the night, streaks of tracer rounds carving red lines through darkness. Ortega shouted into the comms, contact at Delta, holding position, requesting air support. Alena barely heard him, she was lost inside the rhythm. Fire, just reload, fire, each shot carving a heartbeat in time. She felt the recoil travel up her arms like pulse lines of thunder. The Humvee rocked from impact, bullets pinging off armor, fragments hissing through air. Then the night exploded, a mortar shell hit the ridge behind them, sand and rock erupting like a beast breaking free. She ducked, dust filling her lungs, the blast ringing in her ears. Ortega grabbed her vest, shouting something she couldn't hear, only the faint vibration of his voice through the chaos. She looked back through the scope, eyes stinging, vision blurred, but she saw it, a figure standing apart from the wreckage, holding a radio transmitter, the one calling in artillery. She shifted position, ignoring pain, lined up the reticle, squeezed slow, controlled the rifle, whispered back, and the figure fell. Silence again. But the kind that follows ruin. The first light of dawn spilled across the horizon, turning the desert into molten gold, smoke rising from the burned-out trucks like the ghosts of machines. Alena sat with her back against the Humvee, her ears still ringing from the night before. Ortega moved around, checking ammo crates, collecting shell casings, his face streaked with dust, his eyes rimmed red with exhaustion. The radio finally cracked through with command voices distant and tired as support had hit the remnants of the convoy hours ago. The area was secure now. So they said. Alena didn't feel secure. Her hands still trembled, not from fear but from the energy left over from battle. The body never turns off easy once it learns to survive. Ortega dropped beside her, tossing a ration pack half empty. You pulled off more kills than half the platoon last night, rookie, he said, chewing on a protein bar like it was just another morning. She stared out at the horizon, the valley stretching endless, every dune hiding something, maybe bodies, maybe memories. She didn't answer him right away, just watched the sun climb higher, the heat coming back fast, the smell of gunpowder mixing with the dry metallic scent of sand in her head. The shot replayed again. And again the man with the transmitter, his silhouette falling in perfect silence, her finger on the trigger without hesitation. It had been clean, too clean, she realized. Ortega saw the look in her eyes and sighed. You can't start thinking about it, Ward, that way lies crazy. You did what needed to be done. She nodded, but the words barely touched her. The weight wasn't in her body, it was behind her ribs, a heavy pulse of something she didn't have a name for. Later that afternoon, the recovery unit arrived, 2 armored trucks, and a medic convoy, the soldiers climbing out loud and laughing the way men do when they survive something they shouldn't have. Alena helped pack the gear, her movements automatic, the rifle disassembled piece by piece, cleaned and cased, each part wiped of dust but not of memory. The commanding officer, Colonel Briggs, showed up just before they rolled out, tall man with desert goggles and a face that looked carved from the same rock as the mountains around them. He glanced at the wreckage, then at her. You the one who made the hit, he asked. Ortega grinned. Yeah, sir, almost 3 clicks, clean impact. Briggs nodded, slow, his voice like gravel. That's a record, unofficial, of course you'll never see it on paper, but word travels fast. Sniper girl, you made history out here. Alena looked up at him, eyes unreadable. Sir, I just followed coordinates. He chuckled low. Just following orders, right? That's how legends start, kid. They left before noon, heading back toward base, the Humvee bumping along the rough terrain. Ortega played old rock music through his headset, the kind of songs that didn't belong in a war zone. Alena stared out the window, watching the desert roll by, endless and indifferent. When they reached the forward operating base, she handed in her report, the details stripped clean, times, distances, coordinates, nothing human in the words, just data. She liked it that way, data didn't bleed. But that night she couldn't sleep. The generator hum outside the tent felt too loud, the desert too quiet. Every time she closed her eyes she saw the refinery, the target, the fall. At 0300 she got up, walked out into the cool air, the sky black velvet scattered with stars. She found herself near the range where they first tested her rifle. The wind moved, steady, soft like breath, against her cheek. She raised her hand, felt the air curve around her fingers and whispered to herself, the wind never lies. By morning the base was alive again, diesel engines growling in the distance, rotors chopping through haze as Black Hawks came and went, carrying supplies and secrets. Alena moved through it like a shadow, her rifle cleaned, oiled, packed, ready, the brass tags around her neck clinking softly against her vest. Ortega was at the comm station arguing with logistics about their next assignment when a runner approached, a kid barely 20 holding a sealed envelope with red tape. He looked nervous, as if paper could explode. 4 PFC, Ward, he said, saluting awkwardly. Ortega raised an eyebrow and gave her a half grin. You're popular now, sniper girl. Alena tore open the envelope. Inside, one sheet printed and stamped, orders transfer immediate, sniper 1 reassigned to Operation Specter, confidential, command authorization required, no destination listed, just coordinates scribbled by hand, 40 miles northeast of current base. She read it twice, feeling the heat crawl up her spine. Ortega frowned. You sure about this? Looks like Black Ops territory. She shrugged. Orders were orders, but something in her gut twisted. Specter was not a name she'd heard before, and she'd heard a lot of ghost stories from veterans about missions that didn't officially exist, places where soldiers vanished from paperwork and only returned as rumors. They left that afternoon, the desert stretching out in long burning waves, the Humvee rolling steady north, the road turning to gravel, then to nothing, the world empty except for wind and the dull pulse of the engine. Ortega kept talking to fill the silence, something about getting back to Texas, about buying a truck with doors that actually worked. She smiled faintly, letting his voice carry through the static. By dusk they reached a small outpost hidden behind a ridge, half buried in sand, camo netting stretched over steel, the kind of base that wasn't supposed to be there. A flagless world of shadow ops. 2 guards met them, faceless behind mirrored visors. They took her orders, scanned them, then led her inside. Ortega was told to wait outside, classified, clearance only. The air inside was cool, recycled, the hum of generators steady. She followed the guard down a narrow corridor until they stopped at a steel door. A voice inside called, enter. Colonel Briggs sat at the table again, but this time his uniform bore no insignia. Beside him a man in civilian clothes, eye sharp, hair silver like frost on gunmetal. Alena saluted. Briggs nodded and gestured sit down. The man spoke first, his tone clipped. You made quite an impression with that refinery shot. Sniper 2.95 clicks confirmed. Kill. That kind of precision is rare, we need it. He slid a tablet across the table. Images flickering, maps, coordinates, faces, grainy photos of armed men. One stood out, a bearded commander known only by code name SF. Target priority 1, insurgent strategist responsible for multiple allied casualties, believed to be operating from an abandoned mining complex near the border. Your mission: neutralize target, no collateral. Confirm visually. Alena studied the photos, the angles, the range possibilities, terrain factors. This was not a test, this was a message. Briggs leaned forward. This is not just about one kill, Ward, it's about ending a chain of them. You up for that? She looked him in the eye. Always, sir. They briefed her for another hour. Every detail burned into her mind. She walked out into the night, feeling the desert again, the way the wind never stopped whispering. Ortega waited, leaning on the Humvee, smoking the way men smoke when they're thinking too much. Well, he said, how bad is it? She looked up at the stars. Classified, she replied. He chuckled. Figured as much. They drove into the dark again. No headlights, the sky a spill of cold fire, the sound of tires over sand like the hiss of something alive. She felt the rifle pressed against her leg and thought about the number 2950, followed her like a ghost, every step a reminder that precision can also be damnation. They left the road before dawn, following a route that existed only on satellite maps. No landmarks, no markers, just the desert unfolding into endless shades of brown and silence. The Humvee slowed near a line of rocky hills, their jagged edges like broken teeth biting into the horizon. Ortega killed the engine, and the world went still again. Alena stepped out, boots sinking slightly into cold sand, the air crisp, the light still grey. She could taste dust and metal and memory. They moved on foot after that, low and careful, every sound swallowed by the wind. The mission brief played on loop in her mind. Target in mining complex, north sector, elevation 130 feet, multiple heat signatures, likely guards, possible hostages. Confirm identity, no collateral. Briggs' words echoed precision over destruction this time. By mid-morning they reached high ground overlooking the valley below the complex. Spread out like an old wound, rusted cranes, collapsed conveyors, and half-buried bunkers long forgotten by industry, now claimed by war. Alena lay flat, her rifle already assembled, the scope pressed to her eye, scanning the compound. Ortega crawled up beside her, spotting scope at the ready. Movement near the main tower. 3 armed men, 1 with a radio, 1 smoking, 2 pacing, restless patterns, routine, no sign of a SIF yet. Ortega whispered, range 900 meters, wind 2 knots, steady left to right. She adjusted her aim, watching the patterns, learning the rhythm. Soldiers move in loops, always repeating steps, habits that give them away. She tracked one looped path, waiting for confirmation. Command silence, no green light yet, only static. Minutes turned into an hour, the sun rising hotter, the heat waves starting to dance again. She could feel sweat running down her neck. The desert was a patient killer waiting for you to blink first. Ortega kept his eyes on the scope, muttering occasional corrections. They spoke little, the way trained shooters do their communication, more instinct than language. Then the comm cracked, a live command voice, low, Specter 1 visual, confirm, on a SIF north balcony, upper level, bodyguard close, 6 meters, perimeter light, moderate, green light authorized. Alena shifted scope focus, zooming in. The man on the balcony, taller, broader, wearing civilian clothes, but the posture unmistakable, a leader watching from above, detached from his own men. Ortega adjusted, spotting alignment, target distance 1,600 meters, hold high, 0.5 wind, drift minimal. She steadied the rifle, her body aligning with the earth, the sand pressed against her ribs. She breathed once, twice, the sound of wind threading through her hair and fabric. She could hear her own pulse counting down inside her skull. The voice of her instructor from Fort Benning echoed faint, don't shoot the target, shoot the moment between breaths, that's where the kill lives. She felt the weight of the rifle, the texture of the trigger under her finger. The air itself seemed to hold its lungs. Then she saw it through the scope, the target stepping forward into sunlight, just enough for confirmation. Ortega whispered, target confirmed, repeat, target confirmed. She squeezed, slow, deliberate. The world snapped, the shot rolling across the desert like thunder, the vapor trail visible for a heartbeat. Before it vanished, the target jerked, then fell backward, a bloom of dust around the balcony edge. Ortega exhaled, damn near perfect again, rookie. But before she could answer, the valley erupted, radio chatter, screaming, multiple tangos moving fast, fallback positions compromised. They had expected her. Mortar fire hit the ridge below them, sand exploding upward, shards of rock slicing through the air. Alena ducked, instinct taking over. Ortega shouting directions, cover fire incoming. She crawled backward, dragging the rifle as the ground shuddered again. Explosions walking closer, each impact louder than thought. They scrambled down the slope, half sliding, half running, gunfire chasing them, sparks striking off stone. Ortega fired short bursts behind them, the sound ragged and furious. Alena's lungs burned, her vision tunneling to motion and survival. The radio cracked again. Extraction 2 clicks east, moving in hot. She didn't look back. There was no back anymore, only forward. The desert roared behind them, mortar shells still dropping in a regular rhythm, as if the earth itself had lost its balance. Alena and Ortega ran, bent low, weaving between rock formations, their boots slicing through dust, the air full of heat and grit, the smell of burning fuel rolling toward them from the valley. Ortega shouted something she couldn't hear through the ringing in her ears, just the shape of his mouth move. She dove behind a low ridge, landing hard, rifle still clutched to her chest, breath ripping in and out of her throat. She checked the weapon, no damage, scope intact, bolt clear. Ortega slid in beside her, face streaked with dust, eyes sharp as ever. Radio extraction chopper delayed. 10 mics, tangos closing from the west. He barked over the noise. 10 minutes could be forever in a place like this. She peered over the ridge through the scope, saw figures moving in a spread line, fast, disciplined, not the usual insurgent chaos. These men knew formation tactics, she whispered to herself. They knew we were coming. Ortega's face tightened. Yeah, someone sold us out. The next few minutes blurred into fire and instinct, bullets striking close enough to taste their heat. Alena fired controlled and measured, each round deliberate, each target falling like notes in a grim symphony, her rifle an extension of muscle and breath. Ortega's carbine barked beside her, short violent bursts, their brass casings piling in the sand like metal rain. Then something hissed overhead, a trail of smoke streaking across the sky, the ridge behind them detonating into shards of rock. The blast through her forward, ears filled with sand, blood trickling down her temple. She blinked hard, vision doubling. Ortega grabbed her vest, dragging her up, yelling, move, move, but his voice was fading, drowned under another explosion. They stumbled toward a ravine, the ground dipping steep between 2 broken hills, perfect for cover. If they reached it in time, her boots slipped. She caught herself on a jagged rock, pain flaring up her arm. Ortega pulled her the last few meters, both tumbling into the ravine, breathing like engines on fire. Silence for a heartbeat, then the sound of distant engines approaching, not theirs, armored vehicles closing fast. She lifted the scope, scanning the ridge above, dust clouds rising from the movement, heavy trucks painted in desert camo, not insurgent patterns. This was military grade. Ortega cursed, low hell, that's not enemy hardware. She zoomed in and saw it, the insignia scratched off, but the design still faint. Government issue. Whoever was running Operation Specter had not told them the full story. The vehicles stopped on the ridge, figures stepping out, their posture clean, their weapons new, their faces hidden behind tinted visors. One of them raised a hand, signaling to spread formation. Alena whispered, this isn't a rescue. Ortega nodded, grim, you think? Before he could finish, a bullet tore through the sand, inches from his hand. Both froze, realization dawning too late. The muzzle flashes from above, bright and merciless. They were being erased. Ortega fired back, wild covering her as she grabbed the radio, shouting into static, Specter 1 under friendly fire, repeat, friendly fire. No response, only white noise. Another round hit the ridge beside them, throwing sand over her back. She could see the angles of fire, too precise to be random. They weren't missing, they were hurting. Ortega looked at her, eyes fierce. Go, Ward, get out now. She shook her head, not leaving. He shoved her hard, crawl, damn it, they want data, not both of us. He stood firing at the ridge, holding them off, seconds buying seconds. She crawled up the opposite side, heart hammering, lungs screaming, the sound of his gunfire echoing until it stopped. She turned back, saw nothing but dust rising over the ravine, and the shape of a rifle half buried in the sand. She didn't scream, she just kept moving east, every step burning deeper into the desert. The radio dead, the world shrinking to breath and survival, and the realization that the enemy wasn't the men in shadows, it was the ghosts wearing her own flag. The desert was silent again, except for her breathing, the kind of silence that hums just under the skin like electricity. She had walked for hours under the hammer of the sun, her canteen empty, her throat roar, every step dragging behind it the ghost of Ortega, his voice still somewhere in the wind telling her to keep moving. She carried the rifle slung tight across her back, the weight both anchor and compass, the weapon that had made her a legend, now the only thing keeping her alive. By nightfall she reached the coordinates burned into her memory, the ones from the mission briefing, a small calm outpost tucked between dunes barely visible from the satellite uplink tower still standing crooked like an old bone. She approached low, checking angles, every instinct whispering trap, but thirst and duty pushed her forward. Inside the structure, the hum of electronics faint. She powered the console, and the screen flickered to life. Command interface locked behind clearance codes, but Alena knew her own record. She typed fast, fingers remembering passwords. The system hesitated, then opened. Files spilled across the screen. Specter operations dating back years, names, call signs, kill reports, none of it official, none of it meant to exist. She scrolled until she found her own file. Ward, a sniper, 1 refinery shot confirmed, status active, operation ongoing, and under that a no termination protocol initiated, authorization breaks. Her stomach turned cold. She stared at the words, reading them again slower. The air felt thinner, the room smaller. The mission had never been about us. If it had been about her, the hit was cover, the ambush clean up. She was a loose end wrapped in desert sand. A sound behind her, boots on gravel. She turned fast, rifle up, safety off. A figure stepped through the doorway. Colonel Briggs, no insignia now, just a pistol in his hand, his eyes tired like a man who had made too many choices. He looked at her. You weren't supposed to see that, Ward. She didn't lower the rifle. Why? She asked, voice hoarse. He sighed. Because you were too good, because numbers like yours attract attention. People start asking questions, and Spectre doesn't survive questions. She laughed once, dry, the kind that tastes like blood. You made me a ghost, then tried to bury me with the others. Briggs nodded, almost sad. You know how it works. You pull the trigger for long enough, you start to see everyone as a target, including yourself. You can walk away right now, no one will ever know. She shook her head, stepping sideways, keeping distance. You trained me not to walk away. For a second neither moved. The desert outside, breathing slow through broken walls, the stars watching without judgment, the wind whispering its endless code. She could hear her pulse again, the same rhythm that had guided every shot since Fort Benning, the math of survival aligning one last time. He raised his pistol, the gesture smooth, practiced. She didn't think, she just exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the echo rolled across the dunes. Briggs fell without a sound. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the body, the desert already beginning to take him. Then she walked to the console and transmitted everything, every file, every order, every name to the satellite uplink, the signal blinking once before vanishing into the sky. When dawn came, she was sitting on the ridge, the rifle across her knees, watching sunlight spill over the dunes. No orders, no comms, just the desert breathing around her. She whispered the words Ortega once said, you can't think about it, you just keep moving. The wind shifted steady and cool, east to west, 7 knots. She smiled faintly. There was good wind, the kind a sniper dreams, as she lifted the rifle one last time, sighted the horizon and fired, not at a target, not at an enemy, but at the empty sky where secrets go to die. The shot disappeared into distance, leaving only silence. And for the first time since her first kill, Alena Ward felt the weight lift. The desert never told her story, it just kept it buried somewhere between heat and wind, but out there somewhere the data she sent kept moving through satellites, through systems, through truth and rumor, and maybe that was enough. Because legends don't always live forever, sometimes they just stop running. And in the quiet that followed, the wind never lied.